This is Joe Peters from MomFit with Joe Peters. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network and the H.E.R Network at Single TV channels 250 251. I am Joe, your coach, your unicorn coach. I've been working and being a coach for over 15 years and being over coaching over 15,000 people around the world from corporate America, Fortune 100 companies, into now working and dedicating my life to help women, especially moms and moms to be, to have it all without doing it all. And that is how MomFit was created as a way for me to give back to the community and be able to help you to understand all the things that nobody told us that will make your motherhood journey an easier, better, faster one, and also will help you to balance that part of your life without losing who you are as a woman, as a partner, as a employee, as a business owner. I am here to support you, and we love to hear from our community. So if you have a topic that you would love us to talk about and find an expert like Caroline to go deeper, please go to Instagram to Joe Unicorn Coach. Follow me there, send me a DM, and let's gonna talk about what are your needs, what you want to learn more about, what are your concerns, what is keeping you up at night. Okay? Please also remember to download the Single TV app on the respective app stores in iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Single TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV, Roku, and Roku Stick in all smart TVs. Today, I'm super excited to have you here, Caroline, because we are going to be talking about such an important topic, and that is how we can help our children to become more confident and independent learners. One of the things that I love about this is Caroline is the founder and CEO of Empower Academic Coaching, where she helps middle and high school students and their families with customized strategies for learning and achieving their academic goals in a peaceful way. Carolyn is a former teacher with over 11 years of education experience, and she and her team members have supported over 200 families in the journey towards educational empowerment. Caroline is passionate about sharing her expertise on how to support neurodivergent students, how students can be successful in the transitions between the different schools, and how to help children to learn how to learn, and how parents can continue their children's educational independence. Now, Caroline, thank you so much for being here. One of the things that I'm excited is how we can start seeing some of these applications, and don't wait until middle school, that how as early as pregnancy, early years, how we can start planting those seeds, so when we get to that point where the stress of that education start kicking in, there are still some root foundations there. Your phrase is if so. One of her favorites is how we are at the small scale is how we are at the small scale is how we are at the large scale. So, Caroline, welcome to the show. I would love for you to share a little bit about your story, how you start working, especially with neurodivergent kids. What are neurodivergent kids, and why that is your favorite phrase?
Thanks so much for having me. So, yes, my story starts in the last year that I was teaching. I taught throughout my career in middle and high school science and English. And in my last year, I was teaching seventh grade. And middle school is such an important transitional time. It's a pretty huge jump from elementary school. So, in elementary school and in primary school as well, students are usually working with maybe one or two teachers. And then in middle school, they jump to all of a sudden having maybe seven teachers, all who have different ways that they run their classroom, different expectations, different forms of homework. And so for some students, they go through that transition pretty easily, and others struggle with it. And I started to get pretty curious about a group of students in my class who were super intelligent, but whose abilities weren't really matching up with their performance in the class. So I started to think about it from their perspective. As a teacher, and I'm sure there's many teachers who are tuning in right now, you know that it is difficult to um, really put yourself in the position of student sometimes because you have so many demands on yourself as a teacher. Your responsibility is to really help those students do the best they can in your class. But for them, they have to do that, repeat that 7 times. So, what I started to do is invite them to come to my homeroom. And at the beginning of the week, we would look at their whole week. And I know that doesn't sound like a big lift, but for students at that age, it is pretty typical to take things kind of a day at a time. So what we started to do is expand that a little bit and look at, okay, if you have a science test coming up on Friday, what can you do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to break that down and help you prepare a little bit each day for it? And we would do that for all of their classes. Through this, I saw them start to be more successful. And I thought, it seems like more people need this. So that's how I first got started with Empower. In terms of neurodivergent students, I think a lot of the students in that group are neurodivergent. So, what that means is we all have some commonalities about how our brain works. And then some people have some kind of different wiring. And that may lead to different things like ADHD, autism, or sensory processing disorder, things like that. And um, I like thinking about it from the standpoint of we're just different. And I like to help students recognize that if they think in a different way, that doesn't mean that they're thinking in the wrong way. But unfortunately, a lot of kids can feel that way in school because it's kind of set up for your average kid. And that can leave kids who think a little differently feeling like they're on the margins. And so I know that in your coaching work, you're helping people to tap into their best selves. And I feel like that's what I'm doing as well with students. And so I'm passionate about helping them because I think when you think a little bit differently, it's really easy for the world to tell you that you're wrong. So, one statistic that has come out is that a student with ADHD will hear about 20,000 more negative messages by the time they're 12 versus a what's considered a neurotypical student. And that breaks my heart because ADHD does come with a lot of struggles, but it also comes with a lot of strengths and a lot of opportunities. These people tend to be like more creative and really think outside of the box. And a lot of entrepreneurs actually have ADHD or are neurodivergent. And so I think it's just such a missed opportunity if we're not, cultivating that genius and helping them realize, like, no, you're not wrong. Like, let's help you in the way that your brain works.
And I love that. And I think in the last couple of weeks, we are being coming into this cartoon a couple of times, both in the Spanish and the English show. And that is the cartoon of the teacher in the desk in front of a line of students. And then one is a monkey, one is a lion, one is a fish in a bowl, one is a bird. And then the message is if he score all of them by their ability to climb a tree, that is the strength of the monkey, then only one of them is going to be successful. The other four are going to just be feeling a complete failure and that they will not. And so I love your work and what you are doing. One of the things that struck me is what is our role as parents? Because as an engineer, my brain is always thinking on proactive. Like, yeah, thank goodness, thank God we have amazing people like you. Hopefully, and I wish we had one in each school, but in each city is not there yet as your work grows. And also by the time that they reach middle school, like you said, they already had 20,000 messages negatively about them. So, how we as parents, as early as baby, can start maybe seeing some of those signs of our babies thinking different, our babies maybe living in the neurodivergent, and how we can start cultivating that confidence and that um, sense of empowerment of I know who I am. So then when they start reaching those standards that I agree with you, the regular school system and the public system is based on boxes. Like, so how we can start working on that. I know that one of the things that we were talking before is how we can start leading with curiosity and open-end questions, and how we can start supporting our kids, even because the majority of our moms are either moms to be or early age moms. So we have some of the moms that are still having kids on that, and then how we can support them all in the spectrum, from the super proactive of encouraging their kids to understand that different doesn't mean bad, but different means that they have a different superpower. And then after that, when they start facing those situations, how they can be advocates for themselves and rely on us, instead of don't saying anything on this is happening at school, I need help. Not as long as middle school, but as early as the first couple of years, because what you are saying, it breaks my heart too. Like that a 12-year-old hears so much negativity about themselves by 12-year-old. Like, no wonder we have so much struggles in the world right now. So what is some of those things that these parents can start doing?
Yeah, great question. I would encourage parents who are curious about whether their child might be neurodivergent. A great place to start is talking with your pediatrician. And then don't stop there, because this is a field that continues to develop all the time. And pediatricians, would be adept at helping with any sort of diagnosis, or at least referring you to someone who could help with that. But really, my favorite place to learn from is people who are neurodivergent themselves. So that can be a great second step. And this is great for moms to be, or moms of kids who are in those first few years. You can begin educating yourself now about these things, because regardless of whether your child has ADHD or autism or sensory processing disorder or dyslexia or any of these brain differences, even if your child doesn't have that, their friends and classmates certainly will. And you can be a part of the solution by helping to teach your child to be very accepting, validating, and supportive of the people in their life who have these differences. I think then we'll all be in a better place. I think another thing that parents can do is to be curious about why your child might be reacting in certain ways. So once your child does start going to school, um, listen to the kinds of feedback that you get from the staff or the teachers who are there. And if you start to hear things about your child, not being able to sit still, or getting up a lot during a test, those can be little clues. Not that there's something wrong with your child, but that there's perhaps something that could be modified about the environment to help it be more accepting for your child. So, one thing that kind of blows my mind that still happens is in kindergarten, we're standardized testing kids. When I was in kindergarten, we mainly like did finger paint and took naps, but that's not happening anymore. It makes developmental sense to me that it is hard for any 5-year-old to sit and do math problems for an extended amount of time. Some kids are able to pull it off. If your child is one who isn't, um, one thing that I find with parents is I'm going to encourage moms, trust your parental instinct, trust your mom instinct. And it can be hard sometimes if you hear from a school like your child isn't doing this and that. If something about that seems off to you, you can trust that. So it's okay for you to ask if your child can perhaps be tested in a different format, maybe not sitting and doing the whole test at once. And I think also at home, you can start noticing things like if your child comes home after their day of school and they kind of like fall apart, and you're like, what's going on? Why are they so upset? Or having a tantrum. Sometimes it can just be really taxing to be at school and try to fit in, stay seated, stay focused. And so you as their parent can really help lay the foundation for there's not something wrong with you by just like letting them feel their feelings, validate where they're coming from, and maybe help them start to think of ways that help them re-regulate, calm down, and transition into what's hopefully a fun afternoon.
I love that, and I love the empowerment of paying attention, because you were even talking about kindergarten, but I have a 22-month-old, and we go into school, a Montessori school, and then at the end of this class, they have like this table where they all share a snack, and all the kids know like that is the snack time. All the kids sit in the little table. My baby sit in the table and start eating, but after a couple of minutes, even while eating, he's the only one that stand up and try to go back to his toys, and then sit back down and then go back in. And it's important to notice things like that, because then we start going into that part of the standard of what a good parent is, and then we can get in the trap of saying, oh, you need to sit down, it's time of a snack, and then compare all the other kids are sitting down. That I just realized that I'm being guilty a couple of times, like, look, everybody else is sitting down. um but then it's also how we can start handling things like that, so we still help them to grow without make them feel that they are different. Because the reality, when I was talking to you, and I actually was remember one of my friends had a kid that actually got in trouble at school because when they were having lectures, he had to move his legs. So he will move his legs, and then the teacher, that probably was a retrograde, that is not very up with these kind of things, was very upset with that and was pushing him to not move his legs. And when the kid, because we know what we know, was physically not able to follow that cue of stop moving your legs, then the teacher read it as, oh, you are not listening, you are not respecting me. And that end on my friend taking him out of that school and finding a more supportive school for him. Because the reality is, and I want to hear your opinion on this, but some of these things are so stupid. Like, right? Like,
Yeah.
what in the heck is going to affect that a kid is moving his legs while the teacher is talking? What in the heck is going to affect that my baby decide to take his little piece of grape and walk in for a toy and come back? But still, we get so caught up on that. And I want to hear your opinion into the influence of the parents and society into linking that to how good of a job we are doing as a parent. So it's very easy for society to label like, oh, you are not supporting your child enough, you are not educating your child because look how he's behaving, instead of, like you were saying before, start understanding like maybe this baby, maybe this toddler, maybe this kid, maybe this teenager had a brain that works different, had a brain that moves all over the place. I know I have ADHD, and this is a cue also on that part of the ADHD, but it's something that needs so much awareness, because it's not something bad, and it's something that we can leverage. And there are things like, if you have ADHD, are things as a parent that will help you and your kid to stay more focused and have a lot less moving. Like, probably, I'm sure that you know that, like the artificial colorants like D40 and those refined sugars that actually activate. So when we start putting all those different variables in the same container, it's almost like we get to a ants cone and poke it with a stick, and then when the ants all get um steady, then we are like, oh wow, this is not what I was expecting. So how we as parents can start working on that part as well, to support people like you, and to also be advocates for our children with society, instead of taking it personal, like this is a reflection of me as a parent and that I fail as a parent because my child doesn't behave like everybody else, because my child cannot stay still, because my child cannot stay quiet.
So I'm going to refer back to something that I know is really important to you, Joe, which is values. So I think for all the moms who are wondering what you're wondering here, really think about what are your parenting values, and that can give you the lens for what your next step would be. So I'm guessing people who are watching this show, your one of your values is not conformity, but that is a value that society has that can often like seep into. Of course there's so many pressures about what it means to be a good mom or a good parent, and when you list out those values, then it makes it a little clearer what to do next. So your child going to have a snack, go get a toy, and come back to the snack. um, if that's not conflicting with any of your values, like if that's happening in a safe way and other people are safe, that can be an indication. Okay, if the teacher at the school has a problem with this, maybe this is more about a conversation with them rather than me correcting the child about something. um, I mean, you can still, of course, have certain behaviors that you want to help your child change. That's just part of parenting. But I think we can take a broader view of like what genuinely needs to change and what's me feeling the pressure of how a child is supposed to act. Honestly, I think there is so much pressure on kids to act like they have a fully developed brain before before it's time. We know now that the brain does not fully develop until around age 25. And that is still an average, right? Everyone develops at different rates. And I think that is something that we forget too with kids. When kids are in classes, it's really easy to do the comparison thing. Schools putting a bunch of kids who are the same age together invites us to make those comparisons. But really, the only thing those kids have in common is they've been on Earth around the same number of days. They each have their own, I call it like a spiky profile. They all have their super strengths, and then they all have areas of challenge or that they're not as naturally adept at. And all of those things can be, enhanced and developed. I really believe all children are capable of achieving whatever goals they have for themselves. That's another thing I would encourage parents to think about too, is as your child gets older, you can start to ask them kind of like what their own values are, and you can use age appropriate language for it. But what do they want their school experience to be like? And that can be a great guide as well. It breaks my heart to hear about that teacher you mentioned. Um, Unfortunately, as someone who went through teacher education myself and was a teacher for many years, you do start to develop these kind of quick ways of looking out at the class and figuring out, is everybody with me? And somehow that becomes really important. But I just challenge all the adults out there to think about all of the conversations you've been a part of, all the like talks you've attended, all the things you've done at work. Have you been 100% focused 100% of the time? It's just not realistic. And yet we expect that of kids. We not only expect them to be 100% focused, but for 8 hours where they're not allowed necessarily a lot of movement. I mean, that's a tough ask. So I think you mentioned advocating for your child. I think that's an amazing thing to do. And it's something that you can do more of as they're younger. And then as they get older, that is something where you can transition to supporting them and advocating for themselves. So, for example, with the person like kicking their feet, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to be able to do. In fact, that can help some people focus better. I have some students who doodle while we're meeting and talking about things because it helps them focus. And that's where I think we all need to have our minds opened to the fact that focus looks different for different people. Especially neurodivergent people can actually help them re-regulate to be doing something active. I'm neurodivergent myself, and sometimes just messing with my phone, not even like doing something, but just like tapping, swiping, those sorts of things can just be very calming to my nervous system. And yet to somebody else, it might look like I'm not engaged. I think we just need to be a little accepting that focus and engagement looks different for different people. One thing that you can start to help your child do as they get older, this is something that I help students with. Um, it is hard to ask for help and hard to ask for your needs to be met. A lot of kids around the age that I start working with, so as you know, as your kids get to be a tween or a teen, they don't want to be different. They want to fit in with the rest of the class. So you can help them with kind of private ways to speak to the teacher. So one thing I'll do is I'll help my students write an email to the teacher and kind of explain more about themselves. Like, this is the kind of learner I am. Here's some things that I do sometimes, and it may look like I'm not focused, but this is actually me focused. And you can start planting the seeds for that early on by having, conversations with your child about even your own needs, your ways that you need support, so that they know that being an adult isn't about being completely 100% independent, but it's about knowing when to be independent and knowing when to be interdependent.
I don't even know where to start with so many golden nuggets that you just shared with us. I want to try to touch on all the amazing things. The first one was the brain, right? Because you are so right. And I will invite all the mommies that are here in Caroline is if you want to do something, find a beautiful poster full of your favorite colors that said, my child brain will not develop until he or she is 25. Because it's a call to reality. And you are completely right. Sometimes we expect them to behave like we behave when we are 30, 35, 40, and our brain is being developed for 5, 10, 15 years. And I was thinking when you were talking, like, that would be as a stupid, and I don't want to insult any moms, but it would be as stupid as asking a 9-month old that is just starting to get up in balance to run and chase a ball because I can. We will never do that. We will never even imagine to push our kid that is just learning to walk, that don't have the walking skill completely developed and mature to go and run. But we and I make that mistake sometimes too. We do that with the mental part, with our expectations on how they should react, on how they could regulate, on how they should react, based on the assumption of our full developed brain versus their brain that is just starting to grow and mount. So that was a huge, huge, huge nugget. If you follow Caroline and my advice and create a beautiful poster, put it on Facebook, put it on Instagram, and tag both of us. Um, then the other one that I think that is beautiful is, and again, you are talking about several things. The first one is how we can build the confidence in our children since they are small, so they hopefully will have much better skills. So when the time comes to those teens, they don't feel that pressure of I want to conform, I want to be like everybody else, but instead they start feeling what they are different with as a superpower, as their unicorn horn. But then I love what you said about talking with them at home, helping them to talk by themselves at school, and then talking with them at school if we need to about what are those things that are different that they do. I will tell you something that is super funny. I giggle when you talk about the doodles because my father-in-law, My father-in-law is an amazing person. He cannot leave the house without paper in his pockets. In every restaurant that we go, he's always folding origami and he's giving it to the kids in the restaurant because origami is the way that he stay present. Like he's talking with us and he's folding. In church, he's at church always with a stack of paper. He's at church and he's folding origami. My my husband does the same that you do. I used to work in Goodyear with my husband, and it was so funny because some people will get upset because my husband will be in a meeting with all the executives, and my husband will be just doodling little ants and little robots around a paper, and then if you ask him, he's like, if I don't do that, I will fall asleep. Or I will just, my mind will go into the dragon's planet and will be completely disengaged. So starting to understand those things just bring us awareness and allow us to actually get into that place of acceptance and encouragement. Because I also love what you said, and that is I was actually seeing a statistic that says that is something crazy like over 60 or 70% of the entrepreneurs and the successful entrepreneurs are not only neurodivergent but also dyslexic. So the reality is they felt such a failure from society in the regular jobs, in the regular standard, that they were like, you know what? Screw this. I'm gonna do it my way. I'm gonna make my own company. I'm gonna make my own rules. So the reality is they are the ones that bring in all these technology advance and new things and amazing things that. And then the other thing that I was thinking about is, and I would love for you to tell me your opinion as a educator in how to handle this. I always have a problem with the you need to study and put more effort on the subject that you don't like and you struggle. So I can have A, and then a C. And then what school and parents we are being programmed to is you have to put more time on that C and move it up. How different will be the world if we actually put a lot of that time into the ones that the kid already enjoy and is good at. So instead of trying to make him good in everything, you say, hey, you don't like math? Okay. You love science? Let's gonna make you outstanding in science. Let's gonna put a lot of this energy into science. So what is that balance, and how we can support our kids in that? And what do you think about that point that I just made, that I just don't feel like that is a very effective approach.
Yeah, it's interesting because I just don't see that same type of approach in adulthood. So, for my business, it's actually better for me if I lean into my strengths, the areas where I really shine, and get someone else's help for the things that I'm not as adept in, rather than I could sink a bunch of time into developing those skills. But why not lean into what my true gifts are? I think there's, you know, there's a reason that certain subjects are taught in school, and there's kind of this minimum level where it helps you to be a functioning person in society and to feel good about yourself. You should be able to go to the store and not feel stressed out about the numbers that you see associated with prices. It's good to be able to have that level no matter what, even if you're not like a quote unquote math person. Although I really work hard to let everyone know math is for everyone. But there's some students I work with who feel that way. Um, I think if they are actively working on getting better at that in a way that feels like aligned with how they want to learn, there's still plenty of time to, yes, also like focus on the things that they're already great at. I do these end of the year reflection sessions with my students. So we're in the midst of them right now. And we look back on their whole year and talk about what they're proud of. And a lot of students will mention they're really proud of, yes, the areas where they were doing poorly at the beginning of the year and now they're doing much better, or where they worked really hard. And, hard work is also a value that you don't necessarily have to value. Hard work can be great, but I think I want to know what's easy for my students. Like, what do you lose track of time doing because you're so engaged in it? If we were, as adults, like more in tune with that, I think people would have more like careers or hobbies that really align with who they are. And there's sometimes not enough emphasis on that in school. I think, like, how many times were you asked in school, like, what are you amazing at? What are you passionate about? What do you completely lose track of time doing? And then it can take a while to find those things on your own. It has to come through a lot of experiences. That's what I think school at its best can be that place where kids get to have multiple experiences so that they can find out what they're good at, because there are so many more options than just math, English, science, social studies. There's a whole world of different things. And I think, like, let's give kids the opportunity to safely explore those so that they can make great decisions about their life path. So I agree with you that, you know, it's about both. It's about getting better at the areas that you feel like you're not great at. And the reason I think it's still important to work on those is because sometimes it truly is the child is fully capable of doing that, and there's just a mismatch in maybe the teacher teaches in a way that doesn't resonate with them. Sometimes a teacher will make an offhand comment that will shut a student down for a long time. This is how a lot of math anxiety develops, is from an offhand comment from a teacher, or maybe like one bad grade or one bad year that a student has, and that can set them for a lifetime of thinking they're not good at it. I know, because I was one of those students, and then it wasn't true. I actually ended up really loving math, and now I help students with that. But I had a long time that I thought I just was bad at it, and so for that reason, I think it is good to focus on the areas where students are struggling so that it doesn't become a confidence issue. But that's not where we should be spending all of our time. And we should also spend a great deal of time celebrating. Okay, if they have all A's and one C, let's talk about all of the A's. That's amazing. How did you do that? How can you take some of the strengths from those areas and maybe leverage them to help you do better in the area where you're weak? That's something I love to do with students. For example, I have some students who uh, think they're bad at organization, but they play these video games where they have to, like, they kind of have like a suite of different tools and things, and they're very well organized. So I'm like, okay, are actually great at organizing. What's the method you use to organize this? How could we maybe use this for your, school supplies or for your assignments? So I think in the midst of that kind of more balanced approach, students can feel successful in all areas.
I love what you're saying because I agree. It's important to support them into pushing and understanding where their rely is. I was thinking about two things there when you were talking. The first one is how, again, a lot, as more as I work on MomFit and as more as I work with moms, as more realize that the biggest thing that we need to do as parents is self reflect, heal ourselves, and pay attention and be aware of our own tendencies and personalities. Why? Because things like the A and the C is, yeah, I probably will not let my kid to just have a lot of F's and fail a lot of things, but will I also have the expectation, because that is how I grew up, that is how I learned, that in order for my kid to be worthy and had a good school path and a good college, then it needs to be all A's. And how much I am showing my kid that in the way that I react to what he or she is doing all the time. Because the reality is, I was thinking, like, I graduated from university in 2006. Not even once since then anybody asked me how was my my score in the grades. if I finish university or high school at the high end, if I graduate with honors. Nobody. The only step is actually probably when you are finding your first job that they ask you for that grade. But even that is changing now. So is how we can start malleating that and supporting them. And I agree. I love your reframe of let's gonna find where you are really good at and see what of that you can apply on this that is is not being something that you enjoy. Because I agree with you, a lot of the times is more an emotional block that an intellectual block. So I am completely capable of it, but I had a comment that blocked me off. But I saw that people that are good at these get bullied. But that. So I love, love, love that. Caroline, um, one of the things that I love about what you are working on is, and I want to talk as we start closing the show, is how we can promote independence learning, how we can promote our children to get that desire to learn and know that we are supporting them and have that independence learning experience and how that looks like.
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind that relates to what you were also just talking about with grades, I think it's really important to remember that grades are subjective, and feedback that you may get from the school in any form can sometimes have this element of subjectivity to it. And so in that way, kids don't have control over it. So what I like to focus on is I say that's an output. What are the inputs that you want to focus on that perhaps could lead to good grades? But I don't even want to make that a concern at first. I instead want to focus on like, what's the learning that comes out of it? And that's something that you can do as a parent is ask questions that elicit that kind of response. And you can do this, in age appropriate ways when they're very young as well, focusing on like, what was fun about today? What was interesting about today? Tell me one fact you learned. And as they get older, you can start to have more robust conversations about that. Um, you know, Asking them like what, one question I'm asking in my reflection sessions right now is what is the most interesting thing you learned this year? And it's so cool to see them light up and talk about this one lesson or project that had a really big impact on them, because it's always a clue of like what's easy for them, what did they lose all track of time doing. And so that is a way that as a parent that you can focus on some things that are inputs to great learning and to finding what they're really interested in.
And I love that because if anything that I will take away from this conversation with you, a couple of things is it requires a lot of observance, and then what you are giving the parents around the world that are watching us, over 600,000 parents right now watching us, is you can be proactive. You don't need to wait until it gets to the point that is painful, because the reality is when kids are having that much challenge at school that things are getting out of control, it's creating a lot of pain for them. I think that you agree with me. There is not one kid that's like, oh, this is so fun. I'm just going to dedicate the rest of my year school to have all these issues back and forth with the school and my parents. There is not one. Like, there is not one kid that purposely want to go through that. So if they are going through that, it's painful for them. So
Mhm.
I think on one of those invitations is start working now. Like now. It doesn't matter if your baby's 2 months old, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, wherever your kid is, start now. Paying attention to how they behave, how they can see the world different. Be curious about that. Find people like Caroline to help you and support you. If you start saying like, huh, this is interesting, this is getting out of the pattern. Find help of experts like Caroline to say, hey, I want to run this through you. Let's gonna have a couple of coaching sessions. Let's gonna get into your program so I can understand better how can I support my kid. And then one thing that I completely love about what you said is how different the world would be if we as parents, teachers, and the support system put a lot of energy and effort in what Caroline does and ask what comes easy to you. Don't share with me what is a struggle and why you need to work really hard to go, but share with me what comes easy. What is your in in leadership and in personal development? One of the authors call it your zone of genius, and that zone of genius is what you just said. Is what are the areas where you just lose track of time? You can just stay there no matter what, and then inspire that and go deeper into those things that are actually where their big skills are, instead of taking time from that into forcing them to develop to perfection or to an A grade level a skill that they don't enjoy as much. So, Caroline, as we start closing, I want you to ask you three things very briefly. One is how we can help our kids to have the support system that they need. I'm a big into we moms need a support system, our kids need a support system. Then two, what it will be one last message that you want to share with the audience on how they can support their children on this life. And then the last one is how they can connect with you. If they fall in love with you, if they are already starting to think about things in patterns in their children, how they can connect with you and learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah. Could you remind me of the first question again?
The first one is very briefly how we can help them to create a support system that is there for them.
Right. I love that. And I completely agree with you. I think in our culture, there's so much emphasis on the parents doing everything by themselves. And I think the phrase like it takes a village is absolutely true. So I think find who your village is, and once your child starts going to school, those people are now part of your village. Neighbors, if you have like family around you that can be part of getting on board with talking to your child about what they're learning and what they're experiencing and helping them find their curiosity. I think a lot of people do reach out to work with me as a coach, but coaching principles can be applied. And this is something that y'all can, talk about as a family. You can talk about it with the school as well, like the kinds of strengths that your child has and what you want people to focus on when they're interacting with your child. I think one last thing that I would say is I'll go back to my phrase. So it's who we are at the small scale is how we are at the large scale, and that's a quote from one of my favorite authors, Adrienne Marie Brown. And what it means to me is that parenting is such a huge task. It's a large scale task, but it's made up of tiny moments. I know there's so much pressure on parents to be perfect parents, to raise, do your best job so that you can raise your child to be the best person that they can be. Take some of the pressure off and just focus on in this moment, be present. How can I show up with my values here? And to connect with me, you can go to empoweracademiccoaching.com or follow me at empoweracademic on Instagram.
Caroline, thank you so much. This was a fantastic episode. Thank you for your time, for your wisdom, for your knowledge. And for everybody, go and follow Caroline and follow me on Instagram. Remember, this show can also be heard at the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all programming and news. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and leave it.